So good morning, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, and I wanted to tell you that this room is full of some of my most favorite kind of people. And those are the people that are always curious and lifelong learners. And I'm sure that all of you have had some success in your lives so far, are accomplished in certain things, but yet here we all are together again, still wanting to learn, still being curious, still exploring other things. And I really applaud you for that. And I think that it's great that you're here. And I'm here to share with you about interpretation. Now, this was a new word for me. I come out of education. Initially, I was in film and television, writer, producer, director. Then we moved overseas. And my boys were really young, and they started going to an international school, and I got really interested in education, specifically international education, because of so much diversity. So for 25 years, I was in education. I was an elementary teacher at the International School of Prague for 17 years. Then in Kosovo, in the capital Pristina, I was what they call a literacy coach, where I was teaching non-native English-speaking teachers how to teach reading and language arts. I was a director for a small elementary school for a while, also in Kosovo. And then I was a principal, elementary and middle school principal in Skopje, Macedonia. All of these very luxurious countries, but very, very interesting. So my background is really in education with a touch of entertainment, because I did work in the industry for a while. And so what I'm going to be talking to you about today is interpretation, and we use it in a different way. Interpretation is guiding, and the things that we're really trying to do are to inspire, to educate, and to help people enjoy nature. So today our goals are going to be, we're going to talk about what is interpretation and how do you do it. And then you're going to be very fortunate the last hour to go out with some veteran docents who I've gone out on hikes with. And these are people that have done hikes here at Placerita Canyon. You probably know them already for years. And they've done a lot of school tours. They've done tours with adults. And so you're going to learn firsthand. And I want to say off the bat, anytime you hear an idea, how somebody talks about something or new information that you didn't know, the best advice is steal it. You know, that's kind of our common language, is when you hear something, don't be afraid to say, oh, but so-and-so does that, I can't do it. And in my talk, there's a lot of things that I've stolen, and I might actually give some credit to the people if I remember who they are. It's interesting that the word interpret was actually first used by John Muir. You know, he's the one who helped co-found the Sierra Club and also was instrumental in getting Yosemite turned into a national park. And he wrote these words: I will interpret the rocks, learn the language of the flood, storm, and avalanche. I'll acquaint myself with the glaciers and wild gardens and get as near to the heart of the world as I can. I really love this quote from him. And I wanted to point out, you use the word interpret, and then there's another word here, acquaint. Now notice he didn't say, I'll become an expert in, or I'll learn everything about. What he did was use the word acquaint, which is kind of like a personal connection. And so I want to say right off the bat, you know, I'm not here to tell you the content of what you're going to talk about. We're together today going to discuss how you talk about it, how you present it. But I want to release you from this idea that, do I know enough? What if they ask me a question and I don't know it? It'll happen all the time. I don't have a background in biology or zoology or botany or ornithology. I taught 4th grade science. But that only gets you so far. So I want you to feel comfortable that whatever you know, and in these weeks, you're going to learn more than you could ever tell anybody in an hour and a half or an hour hike. So just relax. The things that resonate with you, that you relate to, are going to stick. Others things might not stick, but somebody asks you a question and then you'll kind of figure it out. So try and keep that in mind. And I just wanted a kind of show of hands. Interpretation is leading hikes, showing nature boxes, explaining the rooms and in the interpretive center. The interactions with people, so it's not just leading hikes. How many, raise your hand, that's kind of what you decided that brought you here in the first place? Okay, and for those of you that you're not so sure about it, or you think, no, I only ask that you keep an open mind. Because the more you know and the more you come to love this place and feel familiar and comfortable with it, you might just find the more you're going to want to share it with others. And it might just start with bringing your family here or your grandkids or somebody. And then, hey, that hike went really well. Maybe I'll try something else. So keep an open mind because it has a way of really pulling you in. Now, the information that I'm going to talk to you about today comes from my experience as an educator. It comes from also, I've led a lot of tours, especially in the height of the season when there were school tours. I was doing 2, maybe 3 a week. And so I got a lot of experience doing that. And then also from this organization called the National Association for Interpretation. And they have a book that I based a lot of this on. And this morning is kind of trying to pick out key points for you. So I'm going to ask to buy a few more of these so we can put in the docent library. And this organization is actually a professional organization where they have a certificate program where you can actually be certified to be an interpreter and make a living out of it. And I'm going to show you their short video that talks about what people try to do when they interpret. Now, most, if not all, of these people are probably professional interpreters. There might be a few volunteers, but it makes no difference. We're all still working towards the same goals. So if you wouldn't mind playing the video, and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Interpretation is important because it allows us to build connections.
Interpretation is important because I don't want people to forget.
It helps a child's eyes light up at the sight of a new animal.
Interpretation promotes you to care about something you might not have otherwise.
Connecting visitors to their surroundings.
Interpretation is important because it connects the past with the future, and at the same time, it connects the future with the past.
It helps people to care about the resources that we work every day to protect.
To help audiences better understand their world.
To facilitate the conservation and understanding of our heritage.
To ensure that people who live today don't forget about the meaning of the sacrifice of yesterday.
It not only helps us give people a sense of place, it gives them a sense of self.
Interpretation is important because it leads to the heart of everything, including your resource and your wisdom.
The importance of interpretation is summed up in words given to us by Tilden. We provoke, we relate, we reveal.
I like to use our history to help people understand that all the issues that we've dealt with in the past are still very much with us.
My name is Chris Smith. I work at the Duke Lamer Center.
My name is Jonathan Spring, I'm from New Zealand.
I am Emily Castel, and I am the Associate of Brittany American Cemetery.
My name is Luann Patton, and I work for the Missouri Department of Conservation.
I'm Rick Morales. I'm the founder of Jungle Treks in Panama.
My name is Jess Corey, and I am the Curator of Education here at the Boston Zoo.
My name is Amy Erickson, and I work for Orange County Park.
I'm Chip Lennox, an AI Region 10 Director and Principal of Cascade Interpretive Consulting.
Soy Marisol Mayorga, Professor of Interpretation in Costa Rica and currently a PhD student at Kansas State University.
My name is Toya Gervais, and I work for the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority in the Santa Monica Mountains.
My name is Jordan McGuinn, and I'm a park ranger for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at Tuttle Creek Lake in Manhattan, Kansas.
Jeffrey Arnio, Superintendent of the Brittany American Cemetery.
I'm Bill Weldon. I work at Colonial Williamsburg.
I am an interpreter.
I'm an interpreter.
I am 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 an interpreter.
I'm an interpreter.
I am an interpreter.
I'm an interpreter.
I am an interpreter.
I'm an interpreter.
I am an interpreter.
So now, after you finish this class, you can say the same words. I am an interpreter. And I wanted to start out with talking a little bit about what our goals are, or what do we want to do? What does it feel like for us for interpreters? So if you can accept that word, interpreter, if you want to say a guide, a leader, a docent, doesn't really matter what you call it. But you are like the liaison between the park and the public, and the one who makes connections, provokes. There are a lot of words that they used in that. So here we have one of our fearless leaders, Janet Kubler, that you had already took a class with, I believe, in ecology. And the question I'd like to ask you, just give it a moment to think, is what impact do you want to have on the people that you are interpretive for, or guiding hikes for, or showing nature boxes to? How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to go away with? Think about it for a minute, and then, yes, Barb.
I want them to enjoy it and be happy in the park.
And that's so rich. That just says a lot right there. Yeah.
The excitement about learning about animals.
Yeah.
Birds. Yeah.
Birds is, yeah. Yes.
I want people to realize that the lives they live in the suburbs and in the city aren't really separate from this place. It's all connected.
Very important now, isn't it? Yeah.
To appreciate and learn how to respect Mother Nature.
Yeah, really important. Other ideas? Yes.
Curious and empowered.
To what?
Curious and empowered.
Help them to be encouraged. Curiosity and empower, a really good word, because right now in our times we don't feel very powerful, do we? So it's an important thing. Renee?
To not be afraid, enjoy, and observe.
Yeah. Because fear keeps a lot of people away, especially children when they don't have easy experiences.
Now, I've thought, especially to you guys and my grandson, to add to the idea that you're going to go march up a hill on a tough hike and get to the top, to add color to that such that it broadens the experience.
Okay, another word, broaden the experience. Anybody else? How about some of our veterans that have been doing this for a while? Yeah, Sandra.
I want the people that I'm leaving with to think afterwards, this is the best hike ever.
We hear that a lot.
Yeah.
Especially from the kids.
You do. Dave?
Yeah, how about we want them to really enjoy the park, but we want them to respect the nature, respect the area.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
A lot of really key words. Yes.
How emotionally healthy it is to be out in nature, too.
That's a good point, how emotionally healthy it is. You know, we find that people are science deprived. There's a lot of research now about that. And like with the Japanese, they do forest bathing as a way of helping with mental difficulties, illness, and just maintaining your balance. Yeah.
Show them what they're missing.
Yeah, so we can pull them in. All really great ideas, you know, great way to motivate to do this. And I just wanted to start out by saying that interpretation is an interactive stroll. It's not a drag and brag. And I got that term, it's not a walking lecture. And this term, drag and brag, resonated with me because I also volunteer at Huntington Gardens. I'm a what they call a botanical, because I work in the bonsai garden. But we did a bit of docent training there as well. And that was the idea that it's a walking lecture, that you're just walking and you're talking. But interpretation isn't that. It's not just the imparting of knowledge or the coverage of things. But it's all these things that you talked about, helping them develop a love. Give you some strategies or some tools in interpretation where you can begin to hit the goals that you have just mentioned. So in trying to focus all of this together, because there's a lot here and how I could do it in just a short amount of time, I came up with the acronym COCO. So it's easy to remember. We all like cocoa. It's sweet. It makes us feel comfortable and cozy and kind of loved, and those are the kinds of things that we want our visitors to also feel. So each one of those words means something, and we're going to go through it this morning. What COCO means, and hopefully it's an easy way for you to remember, are connections, open-ended questions, creative thinking, observations, and amusement. And these are strategies, interpretive strategies. And it's not necessarily that in the beginning you have to hit all 5. You might focus on one. Okay, I'm going to really work on open-ended questions, or I'm going to try to incorporate more observations. But as you'll see with the veterans that you're going to be going with, and they may not even call them these terms, and that's okay too. But this is just a structure for you to hang your ideas on. So we're going to talk a bit about COCO and these strategies of interpretation. Now, first we're going to talk about is connections, and I think the word connections or connecting was used in that short video at least 5 or 6 times. And this is a really important way of having people make nature their own, is by making a personal connection. So we're going to play this game. Some of you may remember it because I stole Vicki, a wonderful docent who moved to Washington. She was kind enough to send me her PowerPoint, and so I stole some things out of there. And so she came up with these kinds of connections. So what's the connection between metamorphic rock, gushers, and taking the final exam? If you have an idea, just yell it out. Pressure. Anybody else?
I was going to say stress, but I like that word better.
Yeah, you're right. Pressure. Pressure. Okay, let's try another one. What's the connection? Maps, reptiles, and weight loss clinics. They all seem very disparate, but there is a kind of connection.
Scales.
What?
Scales.
You got it. Scales. But this is more of synonyms, you know. It's spelled the same, but it has different meaning, multiple definitions. Let's try another one. Mobility assistance device, type of whiskey, and Placerita family. I think I heard it.
Johnny Walker? Walker, just Walker, just Walker.
Walkers! You notice what he hit on, the most important one. Yeah, walkers. Oops. I hit that. So, yeah, deck of cards, New York City, and bees, queens. Okay, here's I believe our last one. Wagons, mussels, and invasive plant species. I think this is probably the trickiest one. Yeah.
Something that gets pulled.
Excellent. Yes, something that gets pulled. So we're kind of getting the idea of what connections are, but now how do we use this strategy of connections in what we do? And there's a lot of brain research over the last, now almost 50 years, that shows that we enjoy learning and we remember if we can connect new information or experiences onto what we already know or prior knowledge. So that's why we want to find out what you want to find out what your visitors know about a topic or experiences they have, and then you can insert or connect new information to that, and there's a much greater chance that they're going to enjoy hearing about it, being on the hike, and also that they're going to remember it. And we call that prior knowledge, the knowledge that we already have. And even young children in kindergarten come with a lot of knowledge. It might not be specific to nature, but it's to other things that we can make connections with. So here we have Lori, and she's in the Interpretive Center. And what interpreters do is they create opportunities for visitors to form these connections between new info and prior knowledge and experiences. So probably what she's doing there is saying, what do you see? What do you know what that animal is, and what do you know about it? And then adding on to information. Or have you ever looked underwater? When you swim, do you ever open your eyes? What do you see? Starting with that kind of premise. So now I'm going to give you some information and see how you might draw the connections. So you're talking about seeds. How would you connect the idea of seeds with what we have here is Velcro? What would be a good, yeah?
Well, Velcro was invented by being inspired by these seeds that hook onto fur and stuff, right? I don't know what specific seeds, but yeah.
Okay, good. Would somebody like to add to that? Yeah.
Possibly growth, because seeds can grow, and there's the children's sneaker there or something.
As they grow, their feet get bigger, and they need bigger shoes. And sure, there's no one right answer, and we're going to talk more about that with open-ended sentences. Yeah.
Not only do seeds grow, but like the seeds will go to the Velcro's on the shoes, and then the shoes with the person walking will deposit the seeds in other areas.
So it's about seed dispersal, really. And those seeds have little pricklies on it, like Velcro does, so they stick if you walk by. Do you ever notice that when you walk through a bunch of grass, you get things stuck to your shoes? It's a way for seeds to be able to move. And then you can start talking about, why do you think seeds need to move anyway? Why would it be better, what's better if a seed just falls, or if a seed moves across to another tree or to another area? And all of a sudden, you've caught their attention because you've connected it onto their Velcro. They understand what that is with their shoes, for both children and adults. Okay, here's another one. We have a silhouette of a willow tree, and we have medication for pain relief. Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Aspirin is made from the willow, right?
Yeah.
Willow tree or roots or?
Somebody want to add to that? And any other depth? Yes.
Isn't it the inner cortex of the bark?
Yeah, it's the inner bark before the cambium. And the Native Americans would use that for both pain and for fever. So you're walking, we have a lot of willow trees, willow bushes along the stream, and you can talk about it, identify what it is, and say, this was a really important plant to our Native Americans, just like when we go to the pharmacy, we buy some medications. Anybody have any idea what that might be? Somebody might pop in and say it, like if you're giving a hike to adults, they'll help you with that. But again, this is a connection. You can sometimes go from something small to something bigger. You can start with the little acorn, and you end up all the way to the ecology. So I'm going to be asking you to break up into partners and do just a couple fun little games. So what I'd like you to do is, with a partner, using these pictures of the acorn tree, the squirrel, the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, a bird's nest, guy sitting under the shade, and then how all of that affects the world. Just turn to a partner, and how would you use these things? You're on the trail, and you pick up some acorns. How would you explain that? Okay, just turn and talk to each other for a few minutes. Give it a thought.
There's a little connection to what you guys just said. Something you could bring up is also how squirrels like to squirrel away, if you will.
Yeah.
Acorns here and there, and their memory is, 8 out of 10. So
isn't that amazing? How much they
direct gardeners, they plant trees.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
My partner mentioned that squirrels and birds eat acorns, but the acorns they don't eat grow in the trees, and those concept of ecology.
Yeah, yeah. And we have such a great amount of acorns and oak trees here that it always is an amazing source of ways to explain things. Yes?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to talk about the interaction between the scrub jay, the squirrel, and the acorn woodpecker, because they all want the same thing, and they all can steal from one another.
Yeah.
The scrub jay can steal acorns from what a squirrel did.
Yes?
I mean, when I saw the guy sitting under the tree in the big global one, I thought it would be fun or good to ask the group or kids if they live in a city or if they have lived in a city, and ask them, are there trees there? To make them think about that. But then also just like in my research, I connect it to how when cities have trees, there's so many benefits, like shade, it cools things down. And even if you, like with kids, you could say, even if you don't think there's animals in the city, like here, there are, you just have to look for them.
Yeah. Might be smaller. Yeah. More hidden. Yeah.
So one of my main jobs is watching movies with my grandson, and the latest round was all the Ice Age movies. And reminded me to see that. And it basically says that a squirrel chasing an acorn causes everything that goes on in the world, including plate tectonics and things.
Yeah, that's a Disney movie you're talking about. I like that movie. It's Ice Age.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Renee.
So Deborah and I were talking about the connection, right? But one of the opening questions that we would have for the children is, what does this little thing, this little acorn, do for us?
Mm-hmm.
This little acorn. This little acorn became that, like right next to the tree, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This little acorn, do this, gives you oxygen, because this tree gives you oxygen. Also, the sun, if you stand in the sun for too long, it burns. So it provides shade, it provides protection. And then we went so on and so on with all the other little details, you know, that you guys talk about. I was just waiting to. But it's just like, it gets them
thinking.
Going. It's like, oh, it does this, and this doesn't do anything. This is so tiny. What can this do for me, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, because some children don't know trees provide oxygen.
Right. They might be younger, they haven't studied it yet in science class, or they did, but they didn't quite understand it, so you're kind of reviewing it for them. All great ideas, and you see what we've done is, I'm not teaching you anything about acorns or trees or any biology. What we're talking about is strategies to convey that information, to inspire, to guide people towards learning it. So there's the content, and then there's the strategies to help to share that content. I'm not going to do this because you guys really did a great job with your explanations of things. So any other questions about connections? So next on our COCO list are open-ended questions. And we all have a script that we would like to say to our visitors, whether they're children or adults. We all came up with that kind of script. But with open-ended questions, that's another little way of provoking our visitors. And by open-ended questions, what I mean are questions that usually start with how, who, what, where, why, when. And these are questions, they don't have a yes or no answer. And they often have more than one answer. And these are the provocations. These are the probs, the nudges, the ways of helping your visitors, whether children or adults, to say prior knowledge so then you can hook something onto it.
Cindy?
Yes?
In a situation that you need to lead into an open-ended question with something simpler or yes-no type thing just to get some engagement, or do you find that you can just dive right in and then
if the person is kind of clueless about what you're trying to talk about, you're just going to get blank stares. But yes, you can lead into it. For example, rather than saying, spiders have 8 legs, you can say, you know, spiders have 8 legs. Why do you think they need 8 legs? So you can give them information and then ask an open-ended question afterwards, okay? Rather than going right for the information, asking them for it, because then it becomes a guessing game. And people start yelling out ideas, and you're the one that has the knowledge, and you're going to say right, wrong, yes, no. And nothing bad's going to happen if you do that. It just might not be as much fun, you know, because I don't want to have to guess what's in your mind. And we all know in school when a teacher asks something and you're trying to guess what it is and you know there's only one right answer. So yes, add a little information and then ask them a question about it. Give them that foundation. Yes?
Renee did an open-ended question, and with the acorn,
yes.
you might be able to pull out the acorn and say, what is this? That would be the closed-ended question.
Or you could say, this is an acorn, depending on the age. Yeah. This is an acorn that's a seed that came from this tree. Why do you think we need acorns? You see, so you give them a little information. Otherwise, they might start feeling uncomfortable or you'll lose them because your question is a little bit at a higher level. Give them, you know, feed them something and then ask an open-ended question. Now, this is one of Ron's photos, I think. Yeah. And I love this photo. This is around the Oak of the Golden Dream, and the kids are peering through that fence, looking at this tree. Now, look at and they're thinking, you know, rather than coming up and saying, okay, this is the Oak of the Golden Dream. A long time ago, Francisco Lopez fell asleep under this. What you say, they're trying to figure it out. What is that? That's a big old tree. Why do you think it's hollowed out? How do you think it would be if you stood inside? What would you see? Or what would happen if we cut more of that out? And so you're giving them an opportunity. I'm not saying that you can't ever just give them information about it, but you're peppering that information with these kinds of things. And you can see that these kids will probably remember this tree and whatever is that the interpreter then was telling them about it. But here's the thing about open-ended questions, is it will not work if you don't honor all answers. Even answers that are way, you know, you can ask somebody about a bird and they'll start telling you about how their dad just bought a new car or something. And you're just gentle with them saying, you know, that's really interesting. Your dad's lucky to have the car. But let's go back and talk about this. Or they may... so we want to honor all answers, and we want to make visitors feel safe enough to give answers. If we don't, if we go, wrong, nope, 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 you know, and it's again, you are the receptacle of the knowledge. It's not going to work, and you're going to end up with kids that aren't listening to you, seem bored, nobody wants to answer, they just look down at their feet. And so you're going to value participation over accuracy, but you'll deal with the inaccuracies in a gentle way. I can understand why you might think that way, but, or if they say something that's very irrelevant, that's interesting, but it's also, and it's also important to know. And then that way you're making it safe for people to respond. But if you don't do that in the very beginning, it's just not going to happen. Because we know how we feel when we're going to be embarrassed or we're going to be judged if we don't know the right answer. Every answer is good. It's just what you do with it, how you fit it into your interpretation. Also, it's another really good way with open-ended questions to get to know what their interests are. And then you can kind of play to your audience. If there are kids that really love dinosaurs, you can use that and relating it to reptiles and birds and what's living and what's extinct, you know. And every now and then in a hike, I'd get one child who just knew so much more than I did out of a particular subject. Bears. They've seen every documentary about bears. They know all about bears. And the first question they asked me was, we going to see any bears today? But you can start using that. You know they like large, ferocious animals, predator, prey. So you get a feel for the visitors, what their interests are. But then you also have a problem with open-ended questions, is you are inviting people to share. And sometimes you get people that just really want to share and they dominate the conversation. And you can see other people getting impatient, let's move on, or I might want to say something. So you also have to manage that. It's very skillful in your interpretation. And some of the things you could say is, you know, I'd like to hear more about it. Tell me as we're walking. Okay, you're walking along again, and they're talking to you, so you can kind of do it that way. Or you can say, I'd really like to hear more after the hike. You can talk to me more about it. And I'll tell you, 90% of the time, they don't come back after the hike and tell you more about it, you know? But what it does is it's a polite way of guiding them so that they don't dominate. But open-ended questions are really a great way, and I can see right off the bat you've got this down. So when you're thinking about, you know, you had this story with the acorn, what kind of open-ended questions could you ask to begin to provoke them? Now, sometimes an open-ended question will take you in a totally different direction. And if everybody's interested in that, go for it. Because it becomes a teachable moment, and I'll talk more about that. So, any questions about open-ended questions? Okay, so we've gone through connections, open-ended questions. The next C in our COCO is creative thinking. Now, these overlap, okay, just for the sake of trying to distill down, I've separated these. But they do overlap like a Venn diagram. Creative thinking, when you're using this strategy, interpreters provoke or they stimulate visitors into thinking creatively, to speculate and to imagine. Okay, and here we have two visitors looking at when you know there's water in the stream. And as you all probably have seen, unless you haven't seen when there's water, that is such a huge draw. When there's water in the streams, families with kids come, take off their shoes and socks, and when we are taking hikes, sometimes we want to take a moment to do that. We don't encourage them to take off their shoes and socks and those kinds of things, but there's a lot of creative thinking that goes on when they're looking at the stream. And I love this picture. I don't know who I can credit to. I don't know, is this one of yours, Ron? Or?
I don't know.
Okay. So what we see here is the sycamore tree. And look at what they're doing. This boy just discovered something. And look at how focused and concentrated these two children are about it. In creative thinking, we provoke them to think about things in a new way, or discover a new aspect of nature. So we have a lot of sycamore trees here in the park. And what are some of the unique characteristics of a sycamore tree that you might want to share? Yes?
They have kind of funny bark sometimes, and I think the leaves are kind of soft.
Okay.
Especially when they're green and fresh.
Yeah. And a connection you can make with the leaves, and I don't know who I stole this from, but I stole it from somebody, is feel the leaf. It's so soft, it's like velvet. What do you think the Native Americans used these leaves for? You know, anybody here have Charmin in their homes? You know, why do you think they would use that kind of leaf and not something else? Oh, they remember, oh, that's the toilet paper tree. You know, but you've made a connection, and you've also caused them to think creatively. Yeah, Sandra.
And some kid will always ask, well, what do they do in the winter? It's always a
Yeah.
very provocative question.
And you know, that's part of the amusement part, which we'll get to. But you know, with sycamore trees, they have to go real deep into the ground to get their water. And the water further down is colder. So even on the hottest day, 105 degrees, you go and you touch your hand or put your cheek next to a sycamore tree, and it is refreshingly cool. Yes?
When I go hiking, it's kind of funny. This is for all my life. I love to hug trees.
Yes.
And it feels like it gives me energy. So when I took my granddaughter, who is now 5, hiking, I told her about hugging the tree, the energy they give you, how you feel. So now all the time we go hiking, she goes and hugs the trees and says, Ida is telling me when I'm coming back again. And it's telling me, thank you for hugging me. So I think if the little kids is, I don't know, maybe like I see those little kids like hugging the trees. Mm-hmm. So it's something they...
Yeah, and you interpreted that for them, or for her to do that. And here you would interpret, touch the bark of the tree and tell me what you feel. Okay, it's smooth. Not like that oak tree where the bark is that thick. You can do a compare and contrast. And it's cold. Why do you think it would be cold? And they may come up with, you know, all kinds of, but you guide them back to an accuracy. Same with adults. A lot of adults may not know about the sycamore trees. And then with creative thinking, I stole this one. I think it was from Ruth Ann. We walk into the Walker cabin, and I said, will somebody turn on the lights? Did I steal that from you? Yeah. And so everybody's looking around. Of course, eventually somebody says, I can't find the light switch. There's no electricity. Oh, what do you think it would be like to live without electricity back then? Okay, that's an open-ended question, and it's creative thinking. It's provoking them. And now you can have a whole, versus walking in and said the Walker family lived here from this year to this year. They had 12 kids, and they had no electricity, no running water. You take that moment, and that provokes a whole conversation after that. And that's interpretation, that's not lecturing. And so here are just 5 of the activities or strategies for creative thinking, compare and contrast. How is the sycamore tree different from the oak tree? How does it look? How does it feel? These are all in your notes as well that I pass out. Speculation, what if? Listing and categorizing. How many butterflies have we seen today? Or how many birds are of the color blue that we've seen? Or instead of that, you can say, tell me about did anybody remember the names of the birds that we saw? Imagining, what would it be like? Theorizing, why do you think? These are all ready-made questions for you that you just tailor to the content of what you're trying to talk about. I'm going to pass that and go on with time to observations in our COCO. And observations are really important. Whoops. But once again, it takes time. You can't just walk past something. You really need to take the time to let them observe. And sometimes we're filled with, I have to show them the Walker cabin, I want to show them the Oak of the Golden Trees, I'm going to show them the murals, I've got to go to the Tatavian village. And so, and yes, you should satisfy them, but sometimes it's hard to just stop and let them observe. And in observations, they're going to talk not only about what they see, but what they hear, what they touch. Taste, we stay away from, or smell. And this quote from Steve Jobs I like is, creativity is connecting things. Once again, what we were talking about. I love this photo of her. Her eyes are closed. She's breathing in the scent, thinking about it. And so, as I was mentioning, we create the time and the space for observation and discovery. So much in our lives is rushing here, rushing there, doing this, making sure you know that. And we need to, as somebody was saying, it's healthy. Give the kids a chance to make their own observations. And when you do that, you get what are called teachable moments. And those are those golden magical moments when a person is curious and open to new ideas and experiences. They're willing to try new things. And in my bag, I keep magnifying glasses. And we'll stop at a patch. Sometimes we'll use them on the bark of a tree. Sometimes we'll use them around a gopher hole if there are insects, whatever. It takes time. I might not show them as much in the park, but they're going to remember these kinds of things. Yes?
Do you ever get kids trying to set things on fire with their magnifying glasses?
No, they don't. No, I've never had that. No.
Carol?
Yes.
How do you navigate the situations where you might tell kids that there was gold in the stream, at the same time they're walking in the stream and they want to dig through the sand to look through the gold? And also, there's another situation I thought of. Supposing you do have them smell the plants. Well, the natural inclination is to grab off a part, and also we taught here, don't tear the plant because
Yes.
you'll damage it. So how do you navigate those two situations?
That's a really good question. It all comes down to your expectations. And I'm going to tell you 10 tips at the end that are more about protocols like that. And you want to let your visitors know, more so children, but also adults, what your expectations are. And one of the expectations is to don't take anything, leave the park better than you had it. And so if you want them to smell something like, say, California sagebrush, you pick off a little bit, and you say, I'm going to do this because I want you to have that opportunity, but normally we don't just pick things off plants, but I can do it because I'm doing it to educate you. And you pass that piece around. Okay?
As far as the water in going through the stream, but telling them that
generally we don't, when we have the responsibility of children, we let them look, but we generally don't encourage them to put their hands in the water. Okay? Teachers are there. When you're on a school tour, we try to have one adult, either a parent or a teacher, with each group so that they can be the responsible party. For instance, should they fall, we don't, for insurance purposes, put Band-Aids on or do things. It's the responsible adult that does. So when you're taking children, we wouldn't encourage them to really put their hands in the water so much. Okay, but you could give them a magnifying glass and have them look over the water, and they might see a little mosquito fish, or they might see tadpoles or something like that. Yes?
You made me think of another sense. Is there places within the park in which natural geology could form an amplification of sounds so that you can ask them to sit and listen?
You know, that's a really good, I don't know of one. Does anybody here know of one?
Unnatural one under the road.
Yeah.
Oh, where the murals are. Yeah, there, and sometimes we let them yell. If it's a really rambunctious group, as we're walking through, okay, you can yell as loud as you want, and kids really like that, and they kind of calm down again. So yeah, that's a good place.
Put down in the scribe.
Okay.
Yeah. It helps you to keep them in control. And then also observation. Yeah, oh yeah, sorry, Ruth Ann.
That's okay. When I hear a bird or other noise, a lot of times I'll say we're having 15 minutes of silence. 15 seconds of silence, not 15 minutes. 15 seconds of silence, and does anyone hear anything? So that's, you kind of have to be aware of the noise yourself first.
Yeah. And also that will calm them down. And that's a good part of observation, is actually direct them. Because unfortunately, children don't really have a whole lot of quiet time now. Quiet time that this is semi-supervised. And so their attention spans, I know from teaching over 25, 30 years, I could really see a change in the children I most recently taught to those, say, 25, 30 years ago, where they're more apt to be quiet and to settle down, and things don't move as quickly. And also depend on your students, or depend on your, because I was talking about teaching, depend on your visitors. Oh, look up there. Let's say you're launched into something and they're really in it, but some visitor, adult or child says, look at that bird up there. And we see these all the time, red-tailed hawks. And just stop what you're doing and talk about that. Extrapolate onto predator and prey, or the physics of flight, or whatever they seem to be interested in. And this is visitor motivated. It's the actual animal that provoked the curiosity, and go with it. And like with Ruth Ann's idea, if they're all standing there listening, and then you hear that call, which is very unique, of a red-tailed hawk, it just plays right into it. So be aware of those things around you. You see a lizard scurrying. I did one hike, and we tend to maybe kind of make quick judgments when we're sussing out our visitors. And there was one little girl there who looked like she was totally out of it. She was just there walking along, but not really engaged, didn't want to share any of her ideas. But she was the one who noticed the lizard on the rock. And then everybody, all of a sudden when that happened, and she just said, hey, there's a lizard. And we talked about that, and she noticed some footprints, and that was her style, her way of learning. It wasn't that she was tuned out, it's that she was really tuned in her own way. So if a visitor shows an interest in something, observe it, stop and use it. It might not play into your agenda, but again, it's a teachable moment. So flexibility is a key. Okay, anything about observations? I think that one's pretty straightforward. It's just taking the time to create those opportunities where they observe. And then amusement, which is basically fun. Now, you don't have to be a comedian, an entertainer. Sometimes it's intimidating. But people love stories. We're hardwired to listen to stories. That's why we love to gossip so much. And you can couch things or present things in a story, using your hands, using your voice, bringing them into it. And one of the stories that I like to talk about is the wood rat. This is my wood rat hat that Ron's amazingly creative wife, Jill, did. And you see there's a little wood rat. And so you start out there, you know, there's some animals here in the park that love to collect shiny objects. They go around and they collect earrings that might fall off, or keys, or bits of chains, and they bring them back to their house. And they like them so much they create a special room, like a museum, for all of these shiny objects. And then when they did that, and the animal, does anybody know what kind of animal that is? Can anyone figure out what the animal on my hat is? Okay, it's a wood rat. Wood rats do that. And they're so smart that after they created this little museum or art gallery of all of these shiny objects, they also build a room that's a nursery just for the babies so they can keep them safe. And another room where they store all their food. And then another room where they all sleep together so that they can also feel safe. And then they make a lot of doors, in and out kind of doors. Why do you think they make these kinds of doors? And then, you know, somebody might say, oh, because an animal might get them, or somebody might want, and you talk more about that. And I say, do you think that these animals are smart, and why do you think they might be smart? They're very intelligent. So animals might have a different intelligence than we do. And you know what? We think we're so smart, but we still don't understand why they gather all of these shiny objects. They don't eat them. They don't use them as tools, but they do. So you find, and I don't know why, but wood rats just spoke to me. You know, and you can talk about the architect of nature, and but you can tell stories like that. You can tell about the first time you saw this animal or this one. Just make the story short so that you're moving on. So that would be a part of amusement, telling stories. Interpreters provide opportunities to do something new. I'll tell you, these are nature boxes, Native American. When you have a mortar and pestle and you have some acorns, the kids will line up to grind those because they've never done that before. And it's fun, and then they see something before their very eyes turn into a powder, and then you talk about it. And that's why nature boxes are so great, because there's so many hands-on opportunities. So when, if you're not really sold on hiking, do the nature boxes. They're really, really fun, and they have so many interesting things in them. Amusement. I led third graders on a whole hike that totally was around scat. We're walking along, and there's a big pile of coyote scat right in the middle, and I just stopped. I said, "What is that?" "Ooh, that's poop." Normal. Where do you think it came from? And then we started talking about it, and there were a couple kids that were so enthralled by it. The hike actually was from one pile of scat to another pile of scat. But then we also started talking about footprints. So they were looking for footprints as well. And then we were talking about, well, how does this look different from dog poop? Why does it have all those chunks in there? Woo, what is that? It shows what animals eat. And, with dogs, you give them very specially made food, but coyotes, they have to eat what they can get. And sometimes there's bones in there, and there's fur, and there's pits from seeds. You can talk all about that. And then what I usually try to do is I usually pick up trash as I walk. I have a glove because I want to model that. And I might pick up a candy wrapper, and I'll say, this smells like candy. What do you think would happen if a coyote ate this? What do you think would happen if you ate it? And then we start talking about how it would make you sick. It would give you a tummy ache. So you see, that's really important. Even the smallest little bits of trash, because they smell like food to animals, and we don't want to give them tummy aches. So you can go from one thing and take them to another place. Be enthusiastic. Vicki did a survey and asked all the veteran docents, what's the most important thing when you're taking kids on the hike? And by far, the one major advice was be enthusiastic. You don't want to be anywhere else. This is the best day also of your life. If you want them to enjoy it, you enjoy it too. I'm so happy you're here. This is one of my most favorite places on the earth, and I can't wait to show you some things about it. Even if you're tired, even if it's drizzling, even if you have visitors that might not be as responsive to you, you still try and maintain that. So we have all of the 5 strategies. As I mentioned before, try one. It'll lead you into another. Don't be intimidated by all of this. Have fun with it as well. You already know probably most of what I'm talking about just in your everyday life experience. I'm just kind of focusing a light on it. So I want to get now to these 10 tips. Of course, the tip for this little girl is I hope you don't have hay fever or wipe your nose if you get pollen on it. But these are in your handout as well. So here are the 10 tips. And if you have any questions about them, please feel free to ask. The first one is wait for everyone's attention. So many things happen that we are unaware of because we are distracted. Of course, with the phone, look at this opportunity, totally wasted. And if you're trying to talk over people, or some kids are way over here, or adults are having a conversation in the background, just as I did here, patiently, I'm not going to get mad or impatient or whatever. I'm just going to stop and wait for your attention. And people will gradually, sometimes kids are just so excited, where, what, when, they're here, they never really get to a park. Parents are feeling great because they're not working and they're out with their families, and or they're hiking with a friend and they want to catch up. Well, then don't go on this hike, go on your own hike, but wait for attention. Introduce yourself. And I put a picture of Herb up here because he's really great at that, if you've noticed. Hi, I'm Herb. you know, and he'll start talking to you. He'll start a conversation with anybody. So when you have your group together, introduce yourself. Tell them not a lot about you, but a little bit about you so that they know who you are and they can relate to you and bond. Now, expectations. This goes to your question. You want to set up the expectations right in the beginning because it's a little bit, sometimes you might have to remind people, but it's a little bit harder. So for the kids, it's really important. And these are the 3 things that we always tell them at the onset. Stay on the trails, and you can explain why. There are snakes, there is poison oak, and so we want to make sure and keep you safe. And there are situations where you'll say, don't touch that, that's poison oak, and the kid will do that right away, but that's later. Don't take anything. I just put that in there because it filled up the space, but you could say, as you were talking about with the water, we don't want to disturb anything. You know, you might pick up a leaf, and you see that happening. Walk along and they see a stone, and they just kind of grab it, put it in their pocket, you know, or acorns put in their pocket. And you saw it happen, and you say, you know, birds really love acorns, and so do squirrels. And if I was in your house, wouldn't you think I was really rude if I walked in and opened your refrigerator and took out some food? And sometimes you don't have to say anything. They'll just kind of eventually kind of drop it as they go. If they don't, you can point it out more. And then walk behind me, especially for kids. You don't want them to run ahead. Now, it makes it a little tricky. That's why when you're walking, you can't really interpret. So you want to walk and stop. It's hard to interpret because unless you want to walk backwards, but I don't think that'll work. So you kind of think of the walking spaces as for that really gabby person to be talking to you, or you're thinking about and you're observing them as to what would be next. So expectations, bathrooms. Have them all go to the bathroom before you start. That's your expectation because you're expecting that nobody's going to, of course it happens once in a while, but you're expecting them to be okay for an hour. Explain what you'll be doing. We're going to go on an hour hike, and we're going to be going on 2 trails, the Heritage Trail and the Ecology Trail. And we're going to see some clues about what animals live here. We may talk a little bit about plants. And if you have any questions, just let us know. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to discover some things, however you want to phrase it, but you want to explain what you'll be doing. Like with the kids, it's always halfway into it, we've all had that experience. When's lunch? When's lunch? And I'll say, it's not an hour yet, but you know what? I get really hungry too, so I want to eat as well, so I'm going to let you know. Don't worry about it, because I want to have my lunch too. So you want to explain what you'll be doing. Use cocoa whenever you can. Know your audience. Here we have Susie Herman, and she was I learned a lot from Susie too. Here she's with adults, and she's explaining here in the classroom certain things, and she's got a prop in front. So by know your audience, I'm saying play to their interests, play to their age. If it's a special interest group, use that. If there's experts in your group that might be able to help you out with questions, you know, hey Sally, do you know what kind of bird that is? I know that you're a bird watcher. So get to know your audience. One thing I do is, especially with kids I do this, not so much with adults, is I have name tags and a Sharpie. And while they're going to the bathroom, I'm making name tags and putting it on them, and it makes all the difference in the world when you can say, hey, Susie, come on over here, I have something to show you. You know, or Robbie, come on next to me, you know, he's causing some trouble here. You can, as soon as you say their name, like you know, so it may be a little bit, but it has to do with expectations, and you're kind of setting everything up so that it's going to be a very pleasant hike. I don't have to say anything more about that. Thank your visitors and invite them back. Make them feel like this is their resource and that you really enjoyed being with them and you want them to come back. And every now and then I have a child who say, yeah, I want to come back. Will you remember me? Will you be here if I come back? Because we've made that kind of personal connection. You know, bring your brothers and sisters, bring your friends, bring your grandparents. Now this one is really, I found very helpful. And this is also a teacher thing. Reflect on what worked and what you might change next time. It's metacognitive. I can do something good if I know what I did to make it work. So make notes about it. Or if something didn't work, there was a person there that just was a little surly or you couldn't connect with, think about what was it? How could I might have, and then what you're doing is you're developing your palette of strategies. You know, you might have some blues and some greens, but you're a little low on the reds and yellows. And so you want to have this full palette of different kinds of strategies in your interpretation. And the last one is remember that every docent is different and unique. And that's great. We don't hand you a script. We don't give you a list of things you have to cover. It's yours. It's yours to make it as you want, to put yourself into your interpretation, to bring others in as well. Now, sometimes that's frightening because you just, you know, give me a script. What do I need to say? What do I need to do? We're giving you the knowledge. We're giving you the strategies for interpretation. And then you make it your own. And how you, I have one really good friend when I was a docent or in training, and I went with her. She didn't talk that much. She led kids around, and a lot of times they were free to look at things, and she would just comment, you know, they'd bring up something to her. And at first I thought, you know, this was new for me. I thought you really need to pack it full of information. And then I was on with docents who just talked and talked and talked. And for me, it's a personal thing. When I hike, I like to get in my own space, so I purposely walk next to somebody who likes to talk, like if I'm in a group. So the expectation of me is I don't have to really say much, but I'm listening to them as they go. There are a couple docents here that are really knowledgeable, and I just kind of get next to them. It's my own personal preference, and you will have one too. So you're not trying to be like anybody else. You're just finding yourself. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, you showed pictures of magnifying glasses. Do you recommend that you go to Lakeside and buy a whole stack of magnifying glasses and pass them out? Or is that the teacher's responsibility for the group that you're bringing?
No, it's yours if you want them. So I went to a dollar store. I had 5, but I started giving them out, you know, kind of sharing them. And sometimes they didn't always get returned to me, but that's okay. So these are just dollar store ones that I pick up.
And as far as name tags, you bring your own?
I buy my own name tags as well, because of the sticky kind. At one point we talked about that and having a supply of name tags here, but for some reason the idea just didn't catch on. You know, there was me, maybe 1 or 2 others that did, and it didn't really catch on. But if that's something that you want to do, which I highly recommend, it really does help me, and I rarely would have any behavioral problems once I could call the child by their name. We can do that. We can maybe invest in a supply of name tags, and when you come in, you can use them. Yes?
Well, usually the kids would come with name tags on.
We
would find them at the end of the day all over the trail.
Yeah.
Fall off. So they usually come with their own name tags.
You know, I've had it maybe 5% of the time. I know we ask them, and it's in the packet. But I found that rarely did they actually have name tags. Sometimes they'd have a string around with their name, and that would be really good. Usually the younger ones, you know, the kindergartners, first graders, or whatever. But once they got up in the 3rd, 4th grade, I didn't really find it so much.
It's really not necessary because you only have an hour, so.
It's just that, yeah, I really like it. But, you know, again, we're all different. And I do it so I'm not taking up time, but they're going to the bathroom and I'm asking the teacher with me or the parent. You might have anywhere from 6 to 8, maybe 10 kids. And he or she just writes their name on it as they come out of the bathroom, you put it on them. And then that way. But if it doesn't work for you, then you don't need to do it. Yes?
So sometimes groups arrive and they have something in mind they want to happen.
Yes.
And so it's really good to check with the teacher or whoever is in charge about that. And then there was one school group where we were told in advance, in no uncertain terms, these kids are not to go anywhere near the water.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they got wet at all, we were going to get sued.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying you look at it. But in the way the school tours were organized before is you had a lead docent. And I would do that a lot. I enjoyed that because that lead docent goes and talks to the teacher and the third graders, and they'll talk about, well, we're talking about the Native Americans, or we just got through talking about food webs, or we were talking about classifications of mammals and reptiles and birds. So then the lead docent would tell the docents the interpreters that are giving the tours or lead the hikes, that information. And then you have somewhat of a reference where you can start out with that. I hear that you've been studying about predators and prey. What can you tell me about predators? What can you tell me about prey? And you kind of get a sense, and then you're making connections. You're hooking new information onto prior knowledge. Yeah.
So one other question. So Ken had a good thought. Is that if you're the lead docent and you're going to lead the group, do you talk to the teacher before? What are your expectations? Or is it just something where they just hand it off to you and you do it?
There's a lead docent usually, and then there might be 5 or 6 docents that are also leading hikes. So the one lead docent will talk to the teachers. Now this is the way it was set up before. It may evolve because of COVID, but the kids are on the steps and they would bring out birds, or they would talk to the kids. You would take those teachers in and you fill out a form. If they have any donations, you take that, and that's where you ask them. And then that lead docent would go back to the docents and give that information. Okay, because it's chaos. If you have 60 kids and not each docent can talk to the teacher or whatever, and then you're organizing so that the docents know. So there's a lead docent, and that lead docent may also organize the chronology of what's going to happen. Okay, you guys, you go inside first. You guys, you go out in the courtyard, and then we're going to switch for 20 minutes. And then you come in the classroom, and then you go, because they come at 9 and they leave at 12. Yeah.
Do you know if they're going to be the classroom sessions first? Or?
We have no idea what it's going to look like.
In the past, there was something in this room.
Yeah, and that's another way to interpret. I love talking to the kids in this room because you have so many different things to say, but I didn't really get into any of that. No. Any other questions? Okay, I think what maybe we'll do is we'll break for 20 minutes and then come back in the room, and some of our veteran docents have their packs, and they're going to show you what they keep in these that helps them, their props or their provocateurs, what they use to provoke. And then we'll break up into groups and go out for a short hike so you can see firsthand some of these strategies in work. Okay? Thank you very much for your listening.